text is the end of the first chapter of Romans. I'll pick it up with part of the text I read last week because there is context there. So beginning with verse 18, and then I'll skip down. For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and wickedness of those who by their wickedness suppress the truth. For this reason, God gave them up to degrading passions. Their women exchanged natural intercourse for unnatural. And in the same way also, the men, giving up natural intercourse with women, were consumed with passion for one another. Men committed shameless acts with men and received in their own persons the due penalty for their error. And since they did not see fit to acknowledge God, God gave them up to a debased mind and to things that should not be done. They were filled with every kind of wickedness, evil, covetousness, malice, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, craftiness. They're gossips, slanderers, God-haters, insolent, haughty, boastful, inventors of evil, rebellious towards parents, foolish, faithless, heartless, ruthless. They know God's decree that those who practice such things deserve to die. Yet they do not only do them, but even applaud others who practiced them. I did warn you, right? You know, I teased the very first time I preached in this pulpit that we can take verses out of Scripture, you know. All it takes is a 2/3 vote of presbyteries in the Presbyterian Church to change our book of confessions, and we could remove offending verses like this. I mean, we couldn't get the publishers, I'm sure, to change it, but, you know, for us, we could just say, well, that isn't really the Bible. That's not ours. And I will say that with this passage, I am sorely tempted. In fact, I'm a little surprised that our session hasn't thought of it. It's caused a lot of trouble, especially over the last few years. We've been fighting about these issues in this passage in the Presbyterian Church since, I think, the late 70s. We are now less than half the size we were when we started having the fight. And it causes so much strife within people, so much guilt and shame. I mean, it's just been a difficult passage from the start. And as it splits the church and continues to split the church, I find that I'm concerned about one other thing, and that is that when churches leave our denomination, as several big ones have and will over this very issue, the people that really get hurt are the people that we would be able to help with our combined mission dollars. And I find that sad. I find it sad, too, because what a lot of people seem to do with the passage is they know in their hearts that Paul is wrong. I think probably everybody in the room knows in their hearts that Paul is wrong in his attitude towards homosexual attractions. And so it seems to me that what most people then do with that is to say that, well, the Bible isn't worth much. And so they cast the Bible aside as old-fashioned, unworthy, not something that we would put at the center of our conversation that would form us in the faith that is all about expressing the love of God, the creative power of God. And so it gets set aside. Because that's what the Bible is. It's a conversation. It's been going on for thousands of years. The Bible doesn't have authority because it's a magic book. The Bible has authority because we give it authority. That's why it only takes a 2/3 vote of presbyteries to change it. We give it authority because it's a book where people for centuries and centuries and centuries have wrestled with their experience of the divine and wrote down what it is that was important to them. But they wrote it down with their own cultural assumptions. Now, because it's not a magic book, I don't have to accept the cultural assumptions. Reading the Bible, therefore, now, with these new experiences, this new cultural worldview we have, becomes a lot of work. And people don't like to work all that hard in our culture, at least not on interpretive stuff like this. I'm taking a class in modern poetry at the University of Pennsylvania right now, online. Okay? I'm taking that class with, count it, 30,000 other people. And you don't get much individual attention from the teacher. I'll have to get over that. But one of the things he said was, the reason people don't really embrace poetry is because it takes a lot of work to figure out what is said. And we spent an hour and a half on a little 4-line poem by Emily Dickinson. There are literally thousands of posts about the first 2 lines. Tell all the truth, but tell it slant. For success in circuit lies. Tell all the truth, but tell it slant? Sneaky? Round and about? Success in circuit lies? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Spend some time with that and you realize that the multifaceted response is stunning when you work at the poetic line. And it's the same way with the scriptures. You got to work at the interpretation if you're going to enter into a conversation that has illumined God's love for thousands of years. It's kind of a tether, a way to direct ourselves and not get too far off the course. So how do we deal with the text? Well, I don't have to take Paul's cultural assumptions and his scientific worldview. I got to tell you, I don't think he had any idea what homosexuality was. My guess is that his only experience of it was some profligate form of it, some usury form of it. And so he writes it off in this way. But really, he was only giving an example here. The passage isn't about that. The passage is about everything we do to pay attention to ourselves and our own desires that get us out of control and take us away from a focus on the presence of God forming us and carrying us forward. That's what the passage is about. Oh, if Paul were here today, he would be so sorry that he decided to use that example. He'd be sorry. Because what he sees when people just kind of go with that profligacy, when they take their eyes off the presence of God and no longer are formed by it, 2 things happen. They either deteriorate into a kind of moral decrepitude, which is part of what he described here, or they start to hang on to laws that hold on to behaviors that constrict, that make people bound. And actually both are in bondage, right? Because if you've got laws and you have to follow them, as many in our church feel we have to follow these laws about sexual intimacy, it makes us fearful, it makes us grip, it makes us angry sometimes and hateful. And we'd have to say that sexuality in general in our culture has become a usury thing. It's used to manipulate people. It's used to undermine people. Sexual politics is extraordinary. Male politics overpowering and female politics seducing. When sex is used as a way to focus on ourselves and what we want and how we want to get it, instead of focusing on the presence of God forming us, that's when it becomes distorted and our relationships in our society begin to crumble. Now, Paul saw pretty clearly that if you are hanging on to law, or if you have let go of it such that you're just doing anything you want and not being formed in the presence of God, that you are not free. And Paul's letter to the Romans is about nothing if it's not about freedom. Can you imagine what he'd say today? I mean, the issue in his time was whether or not you had to be circumcised before you became a Christian or not. That was their deal. Our deal has to do with sexuality and right-wing politics sometimes, I don't know. But Paul's answer to us is to be free, to focus on the presence of God, to allow this God to form us. And we do this by being faithful, by living, let's say, in the space of faithfulness, seeking out the peace, the wholeness, the completeness of God's creation as God moves it forward. Paul would be supporting those people who have not received justice because freedom in his mind produces justice. And so it is that each of us is called to work at studying the book, because the Bible is the thing that keeps us on track. I have to tell you, I really enjoy being able to talk to my more conservative brethren, because the subject inevitably comes to the Bible. And it's something that we claim to have in common. And the conversations can be turned on their head because the message of Scripture is a message of freedom and love, and not one of law and fear. Don't intend this sermon to be a commercial, but I thought I'd throw one in here. Starting Monday, October 8th, for 6 weeks, I'm going to do my tour of the Bible again, from Genesis to Revelation in 6 weeks. I might skip a couple of things, but mostly it'll be there. I'm doing it in large part to film it for Patheos.com. We're going to put it online at some point, but I need an audience, and I'd love to share it with anybody who'd like to come. So 7 o'clock here, 6 Mondays starting on October 8th. I hang on to the Scriptures because the Scriptures are where the message of the Spirit's love and God's creative power come to me from. It's not that they can't come from anywhere else, but for me there are so many other voices screaming and yelling, dragging us one way or the other, moving us towards a place that is usury and corrupt, or moving us towards a way that is fearful and constricted. Holding on to the Scriptures allows us to keep that compass pointed towards faithfulness, towards the one that can only love and care for us.